We just had a great conversation about why holding boundaries has nothing to do really with the other person, everything to do with what's happening inside your own head. So if you've ever set a limit at work or with your kids or in your relationships, and then watch yourself slowly move it anyway, then this episode is for you. Welcome back, Amy. Great to have you here again.
Thank you.
So I just want to jump right in to a story. I remember I was flying with my friend. We were meeting in Austin, Texas, and we got in kind of late at night. And she had made the reservation for the car. So we met at the rental counter and she gave them her reservation. And they were like, oh, they're so sorry, ma'am. There seems to be a problem. We don't have your car available. And she was like, yeah, but like I made the reservation like a week ago. And they're like, oh, yeah. Like we have your reservation. We just don't have the car. And I, I just started laughing because I remembered that Seinfeld episode that we had talked about in the first episode on boundaries, where Seinfeld's like goes to this restaurant and he's like, you know how to take the reservation, but you don't know how to hold the reservation, which some people might say is the most important part of the reservation. And that is what I wanted to focus on today. And I think in this journey about boundaries that we've gone over these 3 episodes, we did it kind of backwards. But that's actually because that's the way most people think about boundaries. They first look for like magic words. That's what we covered in the first episode. Like, you're trying to hold a boundary and not feel guilty about it and get someone else to respect your boundary. Like, try saying these words, these phrases, and people can sort of think of them as like a magic spell that I cast. And then someone just magically respects my boundaries and doesn't push back at all. And sometimes you get lucky, and it is very helpful to have those phrases in your pocket, because sometimes you just get stuck on like the specific words that you're trying to say. But before you can say those words at the right time in the right way, that's what you need, what we covered in the next episode about knowing where your boundaries actually are. And that's more of a process of mindful awareness and noticing the tension that you have. But part of the reason your words lack power and authority, and that you're not clear about where your boundaries are, is because the most important aspect of boundaries is holding them. And if you don't believe that you can hold your boundaries, or that it's going to be harder than you want it to be, then your brain's trying to help you. Your brain's trying to make it easier for you and just convince you that like, oh, well, yeah, you don't have to set your boundary here because they're probably not going to listen anyway. So just pretend like your boundary is somewhere else. And that aspect of holding the boundary is what I wanted to focus on today. How's that resonate with you?
I think that, you're exactly right. Like that is, some would say, the most important part of setting boundaries. Because, then the setting of the boundaries means nothing, because if people see that you don't care enough to like defend your own boundaries, then I think some people will start to get the idea that you're not serious about them.
Yeah, totally. And I think part of the issue and part of the reason that setting boundaries becomes a battle when you're not clear about how to hold the boundary, then it really just is a request or a suggestion, which is perfectly fine to do. But in those instances, we often create more stress than necessary because we're just hoping the other person will make it easy for us. We hope they won't ask us for more than we can deliver, or we hope that they just don't make us feel guilty. And that actually makes your own emotions increase because we sort of wish that the other person will just see how upset I am, how much they are hurting me and bothering me, and that they will just of their own volition and accord be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how much this is bothering you. Oh, I can see this is where your boundary is. Let me help you with that. Do you ever feel like you get stuck in that trap?
Yeah. I like what you said about how sometimes like when we set boundaries, we kind of try to like dilute our boundary a little bit in order to like help other people respect them. That was a really interesting thing because I just never considered that about like how we are trying to like help people when we should really be, in the driver's seat, like kind of just taking hold of what we have control over rather than worrying about how other people will react to our boundary setting. But it is really difficult to it's a difficult thing to deal with because a lot of the time we're setting boundaries with people who are important to us. Otherwise there would be no boundary setting. They would just not be around or we would not be around. And so that's really difficult because a lot of the time when we set boundaries, for me at least, when I'm setting boundaries, I'm like thinking about how the other person is like perceiving me and what I'm asking for. And I'm thinking of all of these negative things of like, oh, this person thinks that I'm rude or unprepared or distant or confrontational or careless or small-minded or like whatever it is. Because all of these words you can attach to different boundaries that people are setting all the time. And I don't know, I guess maybe sometimes some of those things are true. Like some of those things are true some of the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's part of the issue is the uncertainty of not knowing, like, well, what does this person think about me and how much does that matter? And then we have this whole internal negotiation. And that internal negotiation is actually the most important part of the external negotiation because boundary setting is at some level a negotiation with the other person. It's just really important to understand your relationship with that other person. Is this a person that you care about? Or is this not really a person that you care about? In other words, is this a relationship of mutual respect and trust and admiration, like with your friends or your family? Or is this more transactional? Is it about power? Like your employer, they're trying to say, no, you shouldn't get paid as much money. And you're trying to say, I should. The issue and the reason why this becomes a problem for many caring people is that if you care about other people and you have strong emotions, and this applies mostly to high achieving women, mainly because society has trained women that it's okay to care. And men are often told that, well, caring is a weakness. And it's not true. And these, gender divisions aren't as stark as they appear to be. But that internal struggle is bigger for people who have emotions and like caring about people because, and I'm going to put myself in this category as well, that our automatic response is to assume that the other person cares about us. We naturally fall in to that relationship pattern of mutual trust and respect. And it's painful sometimes to realize, oh, this person doesn't care. And it's true that sometimes the other person doesn't care, but that is more of a challenge for people who have emotions and care about other people. And it's one of the main reasons why I do the work that I do, because those people who actually care, those are the people we want to be in charge, who we want to empower. Because if we let our own emotions and the fact that we care about other people get in our way, well, then the narcissists and the assholes and the tech bros just win.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that people who are like considerate of others and who are emotional and caring, I think that these kinds of people tend to be more understanding and more forgiving. And I think that when other people catch on to that, they realize that they can use that to their advantage.
Right. Yeah, totally. And one of the additional challenges is that as a caring person, I don't want to be one of those jerks, one of those assholes who takes advantage of other people. And so I will go through all these contortions and backbends to not be one of those people. And in our minds, we can often equate holding boundaries firmly with being an asshole. And that is why we don't do it, and why this internal focus is so important. You're often focused on the other person, but holding boundaries is entirely an internal decision. We can hope and desire and want things, but ultimately it comes down to that internal decision about what you really want and what you actually have control over. And it's frustrating sometimes, particularly in relationships with strong power dynamics, to confront how little control we actually have over a situation. And yet, becoming aware of that as quickly as possible and accepting it doesn't solve the entire problem. It just helps you get out of your own way to make it easier to hold your boundary. And that's something that we talked about a lot in the last episode. But in this episode, I really wanted to focus on how you hold that boundary and what you're focusing on that's making it so hard to hold that boundary. And it really comes down to three words or three phrases that are probably running through your head. You're focused on what you don't want and what you can't do and what you have to do, instead of shifting that focus to what you do want and what you can actually do to get there. You're just running around in circles, focused on what you don't want. Like, well, I don't want this, but I also don't want that. And I can't fix it and I can't have both. But then I have to do this to get it. And then you end up circling in uncertainty and frustration in your own head. And that's when it's way easier for someone who doesn't really care about you to take advantage of you. But also, when someone does care about you, they don't want you to be stuck in this spiral, but they don't necessarily even know what it is that you want them to do, because you're so stuck in your own head and not setting clear boundaries that it creates a lot of unnecessary stress for them as well.
Yeah, yeah. Setting boundaries can be really stressful. And I feel like a lot of the time after setting a boundary, I do leave questioning like whether or not I'm like the bad guy. Especially because I often consider if like my boundaries are overbearing or even like infringing on something of a boundary themselves. Like I had a friend who She would be late to things, but I would not say like frivolously. I would say that, she would be late to something in order to make sure that she was taking care of herself. So, like, for example, if she hadn't gone to the gym yet because she just got out of work, like, she might take, an hour to go to the gym rather than going, straight to this friend meetup. So that's like a boundary that she had that like I'm going to take care of myself before I do, you know, extracurriculars or whatever. And so that was like a boundary that she had for herself. And then her friend had got upset because her friend believed that you should not be late to things and that you should be respectful of other people's time. And I just think that's such a funny situation because like it feels like there's no one in the wrong, you know?
Absolutely. The biggest issue in setting boundaries in relationships where you both care about each other is oftentimes nobody's wrong. It's just different interpretations of what being a good friend means. And we have different perspectives and different experiences that lead us to that definition. But we also have different needs. Maybe when I show up late, you are really upset by that. But when you show up late, I'm not upset by that. And so
Mhm.
we have asymmetric effects and asymmetric emotional reactions. But because we're each in our own head, we're judging other people by how we would respond. This quickly gets into this other topic about difficult conversations and figuring out arguments and disagreements, and that is certainly related. But the issue with boundaries is being clear about what you actually want. And sometimes that's difficult because you want multiple things. And if you want to be a helpful person and you also want to prioritize your own needs and be happy, well, sometimes those things come into conflict with each other. And in those instances, if you're a caring person, you're like, well, I want to be a caring and helpful person. And so this other need that I have is really inconvenient. It would be so much easier to work late if I didn't care about being a good parent. It would be so much easier to get this project done on time if I didn't have to sleep or didn't have to exercise. And so your brain can try and convince you, like, oh, well, yeah, you don't need to do that. And the truth comes down to like, well, does that align with the reality or not? Or is this just something that you are hoping about yourself? And I think one of the things that most smart, caring people need to understand is that it's really easy to talk yourself out of the boundary that you have or analyze your emotions in a way to pretend like they don't exist. But one of the important reframes for a lot of smart, caring people is to realize that holding a boundary doesn't automatically make you a jerk. Holding a boundary like a jerk is what makes you a jerk. One of the examples I often use is with like parenting. And let's say, your kid doesn't want to go to the dentist. You could hold that boundary like a jerk or an authoritarian and be like, I don't care. I don't care what you think. You're going to the dentist. It doesn't matter. And you can try and punish them for complaining about it. And you could get them to go to the dentist. They won't be happy about it. It might affect your relationship with them, but you could exert your power in a way that shows my feelings matter and your feelings don't matter. And because I have power, I'm going to use that. And that is what makes someone a jerk, is when they use their power, irrespective of how the other person feels about it, or that they don't care about how the other person feels about it. On the other end of the spectrum, then you have parents who are like, well, I don't want to be one of those authoritarian jerks. So when your kid is upset and frustrated, I don't want to go to the dentist, and they're whining, complaining, you're like, oh, I see how much this is bothering you and hurting you. Okay, so you don't have to go to the dentist. And then you feel like, ooh, but I think it was kind of important for them to go to the dentist. And you're like, but you're stuck in your own logic because you're like, well, but I don't want to be a jerk, and jerks don't care about other people's feelings. And so if I care about other people's feelings, I have to do what they want. And we get trapped in our own logic here. And that is a bigger challenge for people who have emotions, who care about people, that narcissists don't have, because they don't have that internal emotional struggle. But there's a middle path in which you can actually hold that boundary in a compassionate way. So first, a lot of times when it comes to other people, it comes with about understanding their perspective. Oh, I totally get it why they didn't want to go to the dentist. Like, I never wanted to go to the dentist. And then being clear about your own reasons for setting this boundary or making them do this thing, which is, oh, am I doing it to upset them? It might upset them, but that's not the reason I am doing it. I am doing it for their health, for their good. And that is what I am committed to. So I don't want them to throw a tantrum. I don't want to feel guilty. I don't want, to take them to the dentist. If you're being honest with yourself, like, I don't want to have to do this because I don't want to do it myself anyway. Like, oh, but I'm more committed to what is important in this situation, that is their health, than I am to their temporary happiness and feelings about it. And this is the conversation that you really need to have with yourself a lot of times, because we don't understand, like, what is it that I am committed to? What is it that I am saying yes to when I'm so focused on what I don't want or what I can't do or what I have to do? So I have to take them to the dentist, or I will be a bad parent, or their teeth will fall out. But I don't want them to be upset about it. And so we try and end up controlling the other person, like, hey, I'm doing this thing for your good, so shut up about it. And once you're clear about, like, oh, internally, why you are doing something and what your actual limitations are, then you can show up in a much more compassionate way. With this dentist example, it'd be like, oh, I totally get why you don't want to go to the dentist. I hate going to the dentist. I know how important it is to go to the dentist, though, because I've had cavities and I don't want that for you. So I'm going to do this. And knowing that isn't going to magically make them say, oh, thank you so much. You will just release that internal struggle that you have. Because when you can release that internal struggle, then you don't need them to stop complaining in order to change how you feel. No, I'm committed to this. I want you to be happy. But, like, that's not going to change my actions. And then you can be much more present and compassionate. And oftentimes people just want to be heard. They don't need you to actually do what they're requesting or saying or yelling about. They just want to be respected and heard, just like you want to be respected and heard. And then, interestingly, if you actually listen, there are sometimes things that you will hear that will make you change authentically your boundary, or how you are setting that boundary. So if you're living in a black or white world of, like, this is what I want, this is what's going to happen, then you can't be present to other things. But is there something that your kid could say to you that would make you change that boundary? And it might be, oh, but like I'm sick. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm still committed to your health. That's why we're not going to go to the dentist now. We're still going to go to the dentist later. But like, oh, that might be a reason to change and be flexible. And when you're clear about like why you are setting this boundary in the first place, then it is easier to hold the boundary without undermining yourself, talking yourself out of it, and B, actually be more flexible. Do you see how that ever applies to your life?
I'll be honest, it's difficult for me to imagine listening to someone and then changing my boundaries. Could you give another example?
Well,
Because I'm
like,
trying to put myself in the same place and I'm like, I don't know. Usually I'm pretty firm. Because usually I wait until it's like my last straw before I like set a boundary, you know?
right. And so that's the issue for you, is that you are like clear about this boundary. And I'm just hoping that they don't tiptoe it. And if they tiptoe up to it, then no, I have to explode. And that often happens when people are very committed to being a caring, nice person. Because when I'm committed to being a caring, nice person, then I don't want to be dramatic, but you actually end up being more dramatic by not communicating your boundaries clearly, because they will get, violated or broken all the time. And you're like, ooh, but that was just a little bit. So I'm not going to say anything. And then
Mhm.
the other person doesn't know. But you're like, well, they should know. They should see how upset I was. And then uh, they, get stretched and pushed a little bit more. And then finally, you can't deal with your own internal frustration. It just sort of explodes out. And that is setting a boundary. But then often we feel guilty about that. I don't know. Like, do you ever feel guilty when you finally like have to yell at someone for not respecting your boundary?
Yeah. Yeah, because usually when I have this like explosion, like it really does come out of the blue, you know, and just like you're saying, like when you've set a precedent of like, these things are acceptable, and then out of nowhere you're like, it's not acceptable. How could you do that to me? It's it can be like jarring for the other person, especially because now they know that they have done something hurtful to you, and no one wants to know that they've done something hurtful to
Right.
someone else, you know.
Yeah. Well, so there are a few examples that I think if we could talk more about, but just one thing that came to mind was this song from the 90s by the singer Meatloaf. You ever heard this long before your time? Yeah, there's a
No.
famous singer named Meatloaf, and he had a really popular music video for I can't remember the name of the song, but the line from the song was, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. And it was like a very dramatic song. And you didn't know like what that was, but like that I think is the most important part about holding boundaries, is being like, oh, I do want this. I want to love you. Oh, but like I'm unwilling to do that. Not that I can't do that. When we talk about things that we can't do, it's usually because of something else that is important to you. Like, oh, I can't come to your party because I have another birthday party. Oh, just like your friend was saying, oh, I can't make it to the hangout because I'm exercising. Well, that's disingenuous. No, you can. You are choosing not to. And so the other person getting upset about that is not because you quote unquote can't do it. They're getting upset because you have implicitly said, you aren't as important to me as this other thing. And then I get all bent out of shape. It's like, whoa, you're telling me I'm not prioritizing, but you're not respecting my, it's like, no, you want to be very clear about what you can actually do and what you can't do. And there are certain things that we can't do only because they're contingent upon choices that we're making. Oh, if I didn't care about my kids and I didn't care about my own health and I didn't care about my marriage, then sure, I could work all week and all weekend and all night. And logically, we're like, oh, well, I guess I could work all weekend. So like, how do I tell my boss no? Because I can, but like, become clear about the choices that you are making that are important to you that now dictate the landscape of what you are capable of doing. And what you often are trying to say is, oh, I would love to work all weekend. I mean, maybe you would. It depends on the job that you have. But sometimes you don't want to. And what you're trying to navigate and be clear is like, I don't want this toxic boss asking me to do all these things that are totally in violation of my work-life balance. Well, if your boss doesn't care about you, then you appealing to like your emotions, well, that's not going to have any effect on the situation. And it's frustrating because you come face to face sometimes with your lack of power in the situation. Like, oh, my only power is to say no. And then you're like, but I can't say no because then they might get mad at me. They might ask me again. I might lose my job. And yeah, you might lose this job, but do you want to have this job with a toxic boss? And you're like, well, but I don't want to find another job. And I don't want to lose the money. And like, again, you're focused so much on what you don't want that you lose sight of what you actually have control over. Well, you can either have this job with this toxic boss, with the version of you that does not set boundaries. Oh, I can't actually live like that and respect myself and be a good parent and enjoy my life. And I am unwilling to give up on those things. So, either I can set boundaries better and keep this job, or I can leave the job. Those are my options. And I might not like that those are my options. Having those options creates a lot of strong emotions, but ultimately it empowers you because you become aware of the choices that you're making.
Mhm.
Have you ever felt shoved into a position like that sometimes that you didn't want to be in?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely situations in which like things are hard because of like what you're describing, of like the things that you need and the things that you want are just, intersecting. And it can be like hard to set boundaries.
Yeah,
Like,
well, that is exactly probably the summary of it that we need. The things that you need and the things that you want. There are things that you need and there are things that you want. And those don't always overlap. And that creates frustration. But when we are clear about what those things actually are, like, oh, I need to take you to the dentist because it's the only way to take care of your teeth. I want you to not whine and complain about it. I'm willing, however, to tolerate your momentary upsetness in order to get this thing that is more important that we need for your health. And when it comes to setting a boundary, the important question to ask yourself is, am I willing to hold this even if they're upset about it, and why? And do you like your own reason? If you don't like your own reason, then you're probably not clear about why you are setting this boundary. What are you choosing for? What are you saying yes to? Instead, you're just focused on what you're saying no to. Because if you're not clear about that, and if you're not willing to hold the boundary, even if they're upset about it, then it's not a boundary. It's just a suggestion. It's just a request. And we end up getting in these difficult situations because we have needs, we have limits, and your brain realizes, oh, I'm not even willing to stand up for my own limits. So you're not even mad at the other person for testing your limits or testing your boundaries. You are mad at yourself for not holding or honoring your own boundaries. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
go through a couple quick examples. Like, you have a colleague who they keep informally asking you to do more work. Oh, can you just, take a quick look at this? Can you just help me with this? And like every time it feels rude to say no because it's something small, but it just keeps adding up and it's always one more thing. In that case, you can hope that they just stop asking you for these things. But the boundary isn't about the colleague at all. It's about deciding for you what kinds of quick requests you'll absorb and what is the nature of the relationship between you and them. Because if you know that they would do the same for you and that they fundamentally care about you, oh, well, then you're maybe willing to go for the extra mile. And if you don't think that's true of them, ooh, but you don't really want to admit that of yourself. You're like, ooh, because I feel bad that I'm a pushover. Well, like you need to be clear about what you think that relationship is and to be honest with yourself. And then that makes it so much easier to use some of these phrases that we talked about before and to actually know what you are saying yes to so that you don't feel guilty.
Yeah. Something that I just realized was that like a lot of the time, setting and holding boundaries can be so difficult just because we want to avoid a difficult conversation. Like I'm doing that right now. I have I I got upset with my brother for taking me to a movie that had like themes that I was uncomfortable with. And I told him that I was upset and I told him, you know me, like why did you take me to that movie? And he said that he thought it was important to see stories of real people. And I think that that's true, but I think it's still true that like I was not comfortable.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to him because I don't want to explain to him why I feel the way I do.
Right. And but the key thing, a lot of times we don't want to explain to someone the why we feel the way we do because we're worried that they won't validate our own feelings. And that's why the most important place to start with is yourself, validating your own feelings. Well, it makes perfect sense that, my brother sort of tricked me into doing this. Oh, it also makes perfect sense why he did this. And I'm stuck in this binary thing. Well, either he's right or I'm right. And the answer is no. We're both right because you completely understand why he did it. You just are also frustrated by it because the understanding circuit in your brain doesn't eliminate your emotions. And your emotions are telling you about what is important to you. You're just usually not interpreting them the right way because you're like, oh, well, it's important to me that my brother always listens to me. Right. That might be important. But you don't have total control over that. And what you do have control over is communicating it. And then you're like, oh, but I don't want to discover that, oh, maybe my brother doesn't actually care about me as much as I care about him. And that would be very painful. And so I'm not going to hold the boundary or talk about it because I don't want to find out this thing that I don't want to find out about. And that's where we sometimes have to let go of the things we can't control. That my relationship with this person is so important to me that I am willing to risk damaging it because the relationship is so important to me. And it's either going to slowly drain away because I'm not talking about this. And oftentimes we end up creating more drama because we're trying to avoid the little discomfort all along. I remember I was just on a hike in Hawaii a few weeks ago, and we were at the top of this mountain, and there was this girl like scooching down on her butt, and we're like, are you okay? And she was like, oh yeah, I'm scared of heights. And it was like all these cliffs around. We're like, this seems like a terrible hike to go on if you're scared of heights. And she was like, oh yeah, my boyfriend, told me that like it wasn't going to be that bad. I was like, ooh, that's probably spelled some trouble for the relationship, because when it comes to relationships where trust and mutual respect are what the relationship is all about, like if someone lied to you and you believed them, like that's what hurts. And if you don't communicate that, then you're going to end up creating a relationship that you are not satisfied with. And that's why it's so important to realize, A, is this relationship important to you? Oh, well, then that's an important thing that you are saying yes to. Do you know how to have a good relationship with this person without talking about your needs and what is important to you? And it is not, in that sense, a black or white thing. When it comes, however, to relationships about power, where like, oh, you just have a toxic boss and they don't care about you at all, then you might not like relationships that are all about power. But understanding, oh, I don't like that. Oh, that's okay. That doesn't make me a bad person. In relationships that are about power, all I have to do is use my power, even if it's a small amount of power. And that is going to create emotions. And that boss, that toxic boss, they will never validate those emotions. Oh, but I understand that they are valid, and I can hold them and act on them instead of just hoping and waiting that they will see how upset I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's reminding me, I would love to keep talking about this, but I do have to go.
Right. And I appreciate you sharing that because I value our relationship and our communication. And I appreciate what you are committed to. And I've enjoyed this. So hopefully people found that really valuable and take inspiration from you stepping up to communicate these boundaries. And yeah, it's been wonderful going on this journey with you, and looking forward to some new topics to discuss, but we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.